Good morning, Dr. Lamb.
Good morning. How are you?
Ooh, Dr. Lamb.
Santa Claus time.
Yes, that's my friend Tanya. I want to introduce you to Tanya.
Good morning,
Hi.
Tanya. How are you?
Tanya,
How are
this
you?
is Dr. Lamb. This is one of my professors and my advisor throughout the last 3 years. So good morning.
Good morning. Nice to meet you, Dr. Lamb.
Good morning and nice to meet you. Well, the day is finally here,
It is Dr. Lamb.
but I know you're prepared. So
Oh, yeah, I better be.
Today-
This is it.
today should be the most fun day of the 3 years so far.
Oh, boy.
This should be a good time. Who do you have that's from your partnering organization that's going to be joining us today?
It would be Susan Cox. And she spoke with me this morning. I think she will be logging on probably right at 10.
Okay.
So
All right. And what is her title?
Director of Community Support and Nutrition Program.
Director of Community Support for nutrition programs.
Director of Community Support and Nutrition.
And nutrition programs and the organization.
And so she's with One Step Further Incorporation.
All right. Okay. Dr. Hamilton has jury duty this morning. I just got off the phone with him. He will not be joining in, but he sends his support and congratulations.
All right. He came by yesterday on my last class.
Yep.
Telling you, Tanya, yes.
Yeah,
We were able to take pictures and everything.
Yeah, he did that, and so I had class this weekend and couldn't be with y'all. I was online.
Okay.
I wanted to get there. I had online class with my 738 group. We were finishing up, and and then I had my other doctoral group yesterday, and so I have to. So I would have loved to got, but anyway, I will see you on December the 11th.
Yes.
At graduation.
Yes.
And so trying to get my group ready to do their final presentations in a couple of 3 weeks. They're going to do their final presentation for 738. Trying to get
methodology.
trying to get them ready for that. Excuse me. There's been a little change, not a substantive change, but we're doing theirs basically the same thing that y'all did, where you do your presentation in a kind of a defense format.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. It's just the format is a little it's a little more in the future tense proposal type language.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, it's exactly, they doing the exact same thing. And so we're going to start opening those up to, just like we do the final defenses, to let people see those as well. There's Jamiko now, he's in that group. And so we're going to, so we formalized the process a little more so that so that other folks can join us.
Hey, Miss Susan.
There
Hey,
she
Twanda.
is. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm excited to be here.
Yes, sir.
I'm DEOL Lamb of Gardner Webb. I've been Twanda's advisor. I'm the methodologist. The program coordinator, Dr. Hamilton, Jeff Hamilton, is in jury duty this morning. So I'm going to do double duty today. I'm going to lead the program this morning, and then I'll also be acting as methodologist as well. As you know, that is a part of the final process here. So we've still got a couple of minutes. I want to first of all thank you for partnering with Twanda and Gardner Webb in this, and I'm sure that well, I know, because I'm a methodologist, I know that she's grown throughout the process that she's been in the 3 years, and we're hopeful or prayerful that she has been of service and value to your organization as well. And again, we want to thank you for partnering with Twanda and Gardner Webb.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure not only working with Twanda, but with all the information that she's passed from Gardner Webb, and the process that's happened over the last, few years.
Yeah.
So I've seen, I knew Twanda before, and just to see what she's been able to do over the last couple of years has been personally rewarding, as well as professionally. It has helped a great deal. So we were happy to be a part of this.
Thank you,
Well,
Ms.
thank you.
Susan. Yes.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Well, Twanda, I see it's time. I'll let you share your screen and get started this morning.
All right. Okay. So you guys can see my screen?
We can.
Okay. Well, good morning. For those of you guys are out in virtual land, my name is Twanda Carpenter. And let me begin with the introduction to my consultancy project. My consultancy topic is improving volunteer retention with nonprofit organization through implementing onboarding training. So before I share with you about the background information of my program, which is called Community Support and Nutrition Program, this is a program of One Step Further Incorporation, which is located in Greensboro, North Carolina. I want to first share with you why this consultancy project is really near and dear to my heart. Earlier in my career, I had the opportunity to volunteer with several nonprofit organizations, and they really allowed me an opportunity to volunteer with their organization, which provided extensive on-the-job training. And so I really do credit the nonprofit organizations for really shaping and laying the foundation for both my personal experience and my professional interests. And so therefore, I have chosen the Community Support and Nutrition Program. And really throughout this presentation, I will refer to the Community Support and Nutrition Program as CSNP. Now, there are 4 services located under the CSNP program, and they are grocery assistance, which patrons that are in need of food, they can order the food on site or online. The health screening, there are caseworkers in the field, and they will screen patrons for hypertension, diabetes, and obesity, or just really do an overall health screening check. Next is the education series. This is really a collaboration with the University of North Carolina at Greensboro or UNCG. And these are volunteers that come in and they provide healthy cooking tips for patrons to just really eat healthier. And last is the grocery delivery. And this is for anyone who may have a disability and or lack of transportation, and they may qualify for grocery delivery. So as you can see, there are really a number of services offered by CSNP, and they really do depend on the volunteers to really assist with the day-to-day operation. And so therefore, the organization issue that was identified by the director of CSNP is the retention of volunteers. So really my initial goal for my consultancy project was to increase the retention of volunteers with One Step Further Incorporation and working with all of the 8 programs which consisted of including CSNP, teen court, life skills, community service restitution, adult mediation, community offender restitution program, and family factor. However, due to the pandemic, my goal was adapted to increase the retention of volunteers by really developing a volunteering onboarding process to maintain CSNP volunteers. So why did CSNP agree to this consultancy project? They truly do believe, and they are a pillar in the community, as they believe in serving and strengthening the community one step at a time. And so with the growth and the expansion of the program, volunteers are really needed now more than ever. So looking at the scope, we work primarily with volunteers, and the director identified 3 objectives to address the retention of volunteers. So the first objective is, of course, to increase volunteers, but how can we really pull in those millennials? And so we collaborated with North Carolina A&T and UNCG. And please note that CSNP sits downtown Greensboro, kind of nestled in the middle of these 2 universities. And so as a result of collaborating with UNCG and North Carolina A&T, we were able to get the information of our updated volunteer marketing information into their database, which is called GivePulse. Next, we also looked at, of course, the marketing material. And so revising that marketing material allowed really CSNP to send updated information, both electronically and physically, to partner organizations. And so that information is on the brochure, and so they know exactly how to make contact with CSNP. And last is developing best practice. And I'll speak more to that in my lit review. But what I saw in my best practice in my lit review was that really looking at the onboarding process from the lens of an HR perspective. So how did we get the work done? The work was done in 6 phases, or completed in 6 phases, of course, starting with the initial proposal. And so we also looked at identifying the key areas of improvement. And so earlier in my consultancy stage, I had the opportunity to interview the director of CSNP and conducted a comprehensive technology need assessment, which gave me insight to creating that SWOT analysis. And so that SWOT analysis allowed me to kind of look at the strengths, the weakness, the opportunities, and the threats of this organization. But looking at that SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, this was one way to kind of help move the action plan along. And so there are many strengths within this organization. First, looking at that the volunteers, they really do live up to their mission. And this is going to be critical when we talk about really that retention and that onboarding. And so especially when volunteers come on board. There's also a very low turnover rate amongst paid staff, which is also critical, because as new volunteers come on board, they can build that relationship with a familiar face. And so therefore, that is a direct correlation with the retention of volunteers. Also looking at the weakness, there's no technology department. And though technology is going to be critical in moving forward with the action plan and being innovative, the director, however, does oversee the bulk of the technology at CSNP, as well as one step further. But there is some presence of technology on Facebook. And so during this project, the director of CSNP was able to update the Facebook page. And it's going to be critical for the technology department, because this is going to be centralizing for record keeping. And so if we can get information into a centralized database, another opportunity to kind of help move this information on is really looking at allocating funds for maybe a paid staff for technology. Therefore, this opportunity will have a presence. CSNP will have more of a presence on other social media websites, such as Twitter, Instagram, and also the possibility of looking, I guess, getting more donors to come in to fund some of the CSNP other programs. So when we think about the technology and how the technology can really move CSP along, one thread that we came across was really, if we're not able to update this information, volunteers may not be aware of CSNP and all the services that they offer, those 4 services that I mentioned earlier. So looking at my research methodology, I had really a fun time looking at a qualitative, mixed methodology of qualitative and quantitative data. And so in exploring that data, I came across 2 assessments for more of my quantitative data, which was the volunteer functional inventory, and I will refer to that moving forward as VFI. But this volunteer function inventory is really a 7-point scale, with 1 being totally disagree and 7 being agree. And so this inventory also assessed 6 motivations and why volunteers volunteer. And those 6 motivations are values, understanding, enhancement, career, social, and protective. So in addition to looking at the motivation, of course, the literature, what it presented to me was culture has a direct correlation to the retention of volunteers. And so therefore, I chose to look at the Denison Organization Cultural Survey, which I will refer to that as DOCS. And that cultural survey consists of 4 dimensions of organizational culture, which is mission, consistency, involvement, and adaptability. And last, looking at the qualitative data, I was able to develop 9 questions, which, as I stated, I'll go more into detail in my outcome data with that. So one thing that I saw in my lit review, regardless of how the researcher may have phrased it, is that volunteers are often said to really be the backbone of nonprofit organizations. And so when we think about nonprofit organization, or as the literature referred to nonprofit organizations as NPO, they are organized to provide social services to others, and sometimes without really even earning a profit. But one constant in my research is a suggestion that human resource or HR practice of nonprofit organizations today, they really do have the potential to influence volunteer retention. So when we think about such HR practice, they are often based really just looking at paid employees and really not unpaid employees, which we refer to them as volunteers. So really, because of organizations adapting that HR onboarding framework, nonprofit organizations can now begin to recruit and develop onboarding for volunteers who are really motivated, dedicated, and empowering others. So when we think about these characteristics, they are all grounded in the work of psychologist David McClelland. Now, David McClelland needs theory of motivation, please note, is a reflection of Maslow's hierarchy of need. So what McClelland said was that his work really gives insight that our needs are shaped and they are really developed over time, and that our life experience are really developed through our culture. And so McClelland goes on to say and concludes that these needs and life events are broken down into 3 classes. And these 3 classes are really the need for affiliation, the need for achievement, and the need for power. So when we think about recruitment and when we think about onboarding, it is important that managers and leaders have an understanding of the volunteer's need. And so each volunteer or everyone, they're going to hire a higher need regardless. And so, for example, when we think about a volunteer who has a high need for affiliation, it is important that we put them in a task that they can build relationships. They want to belong to part of a group. They want to really create a friendly environment, and they really want to social interact with others without any type of confrontation. So when we think about an individual who need is high for achievement, this need for achievement, they want to have a sense of challenge. They want to make sure that the task that you give them is achievable. But however, we need to be very careful with a volunteer who has a high need for achievement, because we don't want to put them in a task that they are going to fail. And so remember, our goal is the retention of volunteers. So we want to be careful that we place them on a task for achievement. But one interesting thing about need for achievement, their need is so high that it really has a correlation, and they really do exhibit the work of an altruistic behavior known as organizational citizenship behavior, also known as OCB. Last is the need for power. So when we think about that need for power, remember, where there's power, there is influence. And so when an individual who has a high need for power, they want to come in, they want to get it done. They are very effective, and they are very efficient. And so that leader, that manager, and that volunteer, they all need to be very aware that the volunteer is not really being very dominant over anyone that is coming in for services, okay? So, I'm sorry, I need to go back. I'm sorry, I went ahead of myself. So when we think about all of that, it is important that this framework is really looked upon by other, like I said, the leader and the managers, because that onboarding should really start at the beginning of the phone call, or the beginning of the time that that volunteer reach out, especially when we're looking at the recruitment and onboarding, because this is going to be the important step in making sure in the retention of those volunteers. So as I mentioned in my approach section, I conducted a mixed methodology of quantitative and qualitative data, starting with the interviews, which consisted of 9 questions. I conducted the interviews via phone and on Zoom. They were offered to 4 participants, but only 2 of the participants actually completed the interview. I also sent out the surveys that I mentioned earlier, the volunteer functional inventory, as well as the docs, which is more of my quantitative information. And so what I recognized in my data was a link between motivation and volunteering. And so as I mentioned, the psychologist, David McClelland, he surmised that the basic need of an individuals, they have already been met when they actually make that decision to volunteer. So really there are benefits in volunteering. And so we think about, well, looking at the data of the VFI, and please keep in mind that this data is coming from the mean scores from each of these 2 surveys with a 2.0 or higher. So as I stated, that there are other benefits to volunteer that have a direct correlation to the retention of volunteering. But 50% of CSNP volunteers stated that volunteering really helps to increase their self-esteem. And so some of those other benefits of volunteering also build confidence, improves character, and improve the overall well-being, which, as I stated, have that direct correlation. Next, looking at the culture survey, it is important that the role of managers really create that safe space and making sure the environment for the volunteers are very meaningful. So 83% of the CSNP volunteers stated that they can clearly define the culture and the values and the beliefs and the principles within CSNP. My qualitative data spoke also that 50% believe that an onboarding could assist with retention. And that was important, especially as we look at our approach, because if, according to the 2 that I interviewed, they stated that onboarding could introduce the mission, which will let volunteers know why they're doing the work that they're doing, what benefits they are bringing to this organization. So I thought that was very good information to know. So really looking at the breakdown of the work, looking at the lowest level over the last 3 years, the director and I, we identify resources, which also included people resources such as equipment and other materials that kind of help with the execution of this 3-year plan. And so year one, and each of the years began the spring of that year. So of course, year one, I identified the challenge. I had the opportunity to really volunteer just to get an understanding of really what is a volunteer, what really is recruitment. I looked at my lit review that's kind of helped me to identify and formulate resources for this organization. So year two, also beginning spring of January of 2020, of course, I conducted the comprehensive technology need assessment and looking at the SWOT analysis. Because of the pandemic, of course, we had to revise the consultancy project from working with the entire organization to just working with CSNP. And of course, I was able to identify my research methodology. And so year three, I was able to begin bi-weekly meetings with my site supervisor, identify the volunteer participants that will allow me to administer the surveys and collect that data. But also we were able to develop, revisit and redo the brochure for CSNP and really just develop that onboarding handbook, that volunteer handbook. So there are risks and constraints. And so just looking at some of the mitigation, looking at the volunteer, starting with the volunteer fatigue. So it's going to be critical that CSNP keep the database that they have now, which is the Google Docs. And I explain more about that in my quality assurance plan. So that's going to be critical until they are able to solicit funds for the volunteer database. And so that volunteer fatigue, we want to make sure, because there are volunteers within CSNP, there are faithful volunteers. So we really don't want to burn them out. And so that volunteer database is going to be essential in making sure that we can send out information, or they can send out information to let them know about upcoming events. Because of the pandemic and where we are with the economy, no one knows. But one thing that we saw with the pandemic was there was an increase of consumers that were in need of service, really utilizing nonprofit organization, particularly CSNC, because they lost their jobs. And so honestly, that's something that's up in the air because we don't really know what the economy is going to bring. The constraints. This is a small staff. It consists of 4 staff, 1 full-time paid staff and 3 part-time staff. And so they are pulled in many directions. And so, and they are delegated to kind of look over the interns and look over the volunteers. And so they're, like I said, they're pulled in many directions. So the unforeseen obstacle, of course, is the pandemic. But because of the pandemic, other unforeseen obstacles include maybe funders not donating like they have in the past. CSNP, they receive funding from the United Way, so there may be a funding shortage there. And of course, they also write grants. The director of CSNP writes grants. So those are some of the other unforeseen obstacles that are, we just don't know, they're unforeseen. So looking at my quality assurance plan to kind of look at the finished products to make sure that all the needs are met for CSNP, and not only the needs of CSNP, but also the needs of the volunteer. There were 3 specific activities that we're looking to move forward with. And that is critical to make sure that we continue to send those brochures out to those partner organizations such as A&T and UNCG. But also what I did not mention is that CSNP, they also collaborate with the juvenile justice, because there are volunteers that are sent from the juvenile justice department. So we want to make sure that they have an understanding of the new onboarding process at CSNP, as well as to the attorney office. So if they have any clients clients that are in need of volunteer hours, that they will have an understanding of that information. So this brochure will be sent out both electronically as well as physical. Another activity is making sure that that Google Doc is maintained, to make sure that as volunteers come in, that there is someone designated to respond back to them, which starts that recruitment and that onboarding. And last, of course, maintaining the information for potentials in that Google Doc. So this timeline for the first two are really have passed, which was September, but really they're ongoing. For most of the activities. And of course, the persons responsible for these activities are going to be the interns and other designee as the director appoints them to their respective duties. And of course, the resources needed, of course, is updated or at least workable technology accessible for Google Docs. So when we look at the formative and assessment and the summative, this is really that accountability. Who's going to do the information and who's going to be held accountable? So just making sure that all T's are crossed and all I's are dotted. So making sure that the information is sent out and that someone is following up to see if we are meeting the goal. And so if we can look at the information for the goal, we can, I'm pretty sure, make sure that we have that indicator of success and making sure that are we really reaching that goal of our volunteers within the next month or so. My reflection, as I stated in the beginning, I have a love for nonprofit organization. If it was not for nonprofit organization, I probably would not be sitting here this morning. And so I am forever thankful that they have allowed me and continue to allow me to come in and volunteer. My reflection is it is good to work at, I guess, volunteer to work at CSNP and see a director who knows each and every patron's name as they come through the door. And that to me is amazing, and how she, allowed them to just feel free that we're here to serve and really making those one steps at a time. The change that I would make is because of the pandemic, I was not able to visit other nonprofit organizations to try to get some feedback in what they're doing innovative and how to kind of get this information to CSNP to say, hey, let's look at this, let's look at that. Area for future study is what criteria do volunteers use in choosing a nonprofit organization for which they will volunteer? So are you volunteering because your friend? Are you volunteering because of your mission? Are you volunteering because of the location of organization? So let's look at some of those criteria. And one thing that I saw in the lit review and decision making is that there are many organizations that don't really ask volunteers for their input, even down to their job description. So that this decision making, it's kind of looking at that overall communication. Here are my reference. And what questions do you guys have for me?
Excellent presentation. You can stop your screen share now. And we'll go to any questions that any of our visiting folks with us this morning. I said we have one of your colleagues, your classmates, and we have a couple of folks who are in the 738 module at this time. If we have any questions for them, we'll entertain those at this time. If not, I will put on my methodologist cap for a moment here. And I want to commend you on your connection of your theoretical framework, Maslow and McClellan, and how it guided and you circle back and addressed what you learned from that, and then how it affected and how it informed your practice. And that's exactly what your theoretical framework is supposed to do. And you've already covered that well during that section. And so I have no questions on your methodology. It was wonderful. It was the epitome of disciplined inquiry. And that is the heart of any doctoral program, as we know, to become an educated person who doesn't guess, but who knows. And that's that's commendable, the job that you've done this morning. I'm going to share my screen and pull a document up, and we're going to work through our document now.
Okay.
As we do. And we'll make sure that we have covered all of these. I think you mentioned all of these things. You stated your problem. I think you have shown innovation and leadership. You mentioned your special attention. I like that you looked beyond simply retention into acquisition as an area for future study. Again, someone with a doctorate, that is, you know, that is a big part of that, is more than just knowledge in one area. And I think that speaks well to your scholarship there. You did speak to media and problem solving, and you did mention that unfortunately you couldn't look at other organizations. That's a part of this as well due to the pandemic, but you did understand the importance of doing that. And so the questions that come out of that, if you hit all these marks in the first 12, the questions for you are, how have you applied this coursework and this research process in your day-to-day interactions? How has it informed you as a professional?
Yes, very good question. Dr. Lamb, starting the beginning of this program back in February the 9th to be exact, of 2019, I came in with what I have learned through my career as a leader. And so the question is, how has this, impacted me in my day-to-day interaction? I am able to really look through the lens, not just Twanda lens, but look at all aspects of leadership, determining if I really need to put on my adaptability hat and making sure, what can I do to embrace this challenge? How can I get others on board? If they're not on board, what can I do to kind of help them to get on board? And if not, look for other solutions. So I am able to really take everything that I have learned thus far and to really just look through it from a different perspective, and having that compassion, and listening, as opposed to always just talking, but really just listening and just getting the information.
Very good. Which course in your sequence impacted you the most, and why?
Ooh, they all have. I'm going to say really the culture class. I thought I understood culture, but it's more to it than just culture. And I don't want to say in the eyes of the beholder, but really just diving in and looking at the diversity from every angle and being able to apply a leadership, because everyone is not going to look like you, Twanda. And so how are you going to work through those things? Being able to connect with others and build the relationships in the environment, and making sure that the cultures are conducive for learning. And if not, what can we do to embrace a culture for learning and motivation and innovation and curiosity?
Excellent. I think you've all answered all the others, other than, who are you as a leader? What have you learned about leadership?
Well, Dr. Lynn, I'm going to have to go back to Dr. Ball's class and looking at his 4 principles, his CARE principles and high effective leaders, his acronym for CARE. And C stands for that curiosity. I have learned to continue to ask those questions, be inquisitive, regardless, just be inquisitive. A, putting on my adaptability leadership hat, being able to be flexible, being able to sometimes just have to accept that this is reality, but being adaptable and looking at that R and being very resilient, being able to bounce back, regardless of what the challenge may be. I have learned that as a leader that you can't just stay down. You're going to have to look into your toolkit and really just move forward. And E is my servant leadership, that empathy and showing compassion. At the end of the day, have compassion. With nothing else, have compassion. So as a leader, I strive to continue to look at the adaptive leadership style and servant leadership, because that's just who I am as a character.
Well, thank you. And as you know, the final piece of this section is our motto at Gardner Webb is Pro Deo et Humanitate, which is for God and humanity. That our charge at Gardner Webb University is to be servant leaders. I think you have exemplified that, and that you understand that was the goal of the entire program. The goal was you, to develop your servant leadership, to go out and serve God and humanity. And for that, I commend you. You have done a wonderful job. Ms. Cox, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for being patient through the academic piece. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to you, and what I'd like to ask is, what impact has Twanda had on your organization?
First of all, thanks for inviting me, to be a part of this today, and listening, going through listening to Twanda recap last several years that she and I have been working together on this, and how it's really come together, and how actually I signed on a little bit later than I anticipated this morning, because I was onboarding a new volunteer using the documents and stuff that Twanda and I have gone over, and doing that. So it's really been it has been extremely beneficial for our program to have been a part of this. But then listening to the other questions that were asked of her, it has been a pleasure to be able to see Twanda grow over the last few years. And I will wholeheartedly concur that she is a definite servant leader. She and I have had long conversations over the years, and the fact that when we first got together, where she was working at the time, and the kids that she was working with and coming in, the way she handled some of those kids with the issues that they were having, she really was able to move the needle on some of their behaviors and getting them out of a particular situation into a better situation. And even now, when she comes back to volunteer, and I'll see her next week, actually, at an event that we're having, she still continues to volunteer, no matter how much she's got going on, no matter her studies or work or wherever. I'm truly grateful that she has been a part of this, and she's one of the best humans I know, and wholeheartedly support her in what she's doing and what she's been able to do for our little program, and how beneficial has been and is going to be for the volunteers that come in and out our doors. We see about 800 a year, different volunteers a year, and just the impact it's going to be able to have future-wise on them is phenomenal. And so I'm very glad to have been a part of this project and in her journey. And Gardner Webb couldn't have, in my opinion, a better doctoral candidate.
Thank you. Thank you for us, and thank you for your work that you've done, and your leadership and your support of Twanda during the program. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm required to ask it. Do you know there any reason that Gardner Webb should not confer a doctorate on Twanda Carpenter?
No.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time this morning. So I will close with our prayer. But before I close, I will remind you that for those who much is given, much is required. Our program requires you to have a mind for learning, a heart for serving. Bless you and your family for have been in this. I'll give you your charge, and then we'll close with our prayer. The charge is you will be the only Gardner Webb that some people will ever encounter. They expect you to be an authority. What that means is and an ambassador for the university. They want to know what you know versus your opinion. And so you are charged to go out and be that ambassador for the university. Our close this morning is our prayer. Let me serve you. This prayer is from Saint Teresa of Avila. So if you'll pray with me this morning as we close. Govern everything by your wisdom, O Lord, so that my soul may always be serving you in the way that you will and not as I choose. Let me die to myself so that I may serve you. Let me live to you who are life itself. Amen. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Twanda, make sure that you follow through on all of your deliverables to the folks that need to have those. Digital Commons and those things. Be in touch with Dr. Hamilton or myself if you have any issues or questions. Again, I want to thank everybody that participated this morning. If there's nothing else, we will close. We will adjourn. Congratulations, Dr. Carpenter. I'd like to present to the world the newest doctor from Gardner Webb. I'm sure that our dissertation final defense, or excuse me, our final project defense finished earlier than anybody else's at 10 o'clock this morning. So I know Twanda is the newest, the latest and greatest. And so Twanda, I'll leave it up to you to close the program. Yay!
Yay! Oh. Oh God.
Take a moment. You've earned it.
Oh. Dr. Lamb, Miss Susan, and all the other DEOL staff, my consultancy, my DEOL cohort. You guys, thank you so much. I know my words are not together at this point. I see you out there, Donna. Thank you guys so much for your patience, your guidance over the last 3 years. Just, Lord, I thank you. Lord, just thank you. So I want to thank my friend Tanya for being here. Hey, Jackie, I just saw you, Jackie. So thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll close. Thank you, everybody. Well done, Dr. Carpenter. We'll see you all soon. Thank you. Good day.